The Bentley Continental glided through Chicago's Michigan Avenue in the November drizzle, its obsidian exterior catching the city lights like scattered
How could you
diamonds
let this
across wet
happen?
silk.
I want answers now.
Inside, the atmosphere was
We are
dense with
trying to
unspoken
contain it, but
tensions
the data is
and the weight of
already
impending
out.
catastrophe that one
As of
passenger
10
couldn't
minutes
see
ago, your
coming,
systems were
while the
fully
other watched it
compromised.
unfold with
This
painful
data
clarity.
confirms the breach originated
Daniel Mitchell,
internally.
52 years old, with silver threading through dark hair, sat behind the wheel with practiced stillness. He had mastered the art of being present without being noticed,
The key
his
takeaway
hands gripping the
today
steering
is our
wheel
unique
with the
approach
same
to
steady
creating
precision
video
he had
content
once used
efficiently.
navigating conversations between world leaders. Hidden beneath deliberately unkempt hair, a discreet Bluetooth earpiece allowed him to hear every word of the Japanese conference call his passenger was conducting. Victoria Sterling occupied the back seat like an empress, surveying a crumbling kingdom. At 41, she had carved her path from Chicago's South Side to the executive suite through brilliance and brutality. Her blonde hair, usually perfect now, showed signs of an 18-hour day. The custom Armani suit bore wrinkles of constant motion, a woman pacing her office like a caged predator, gesturing at problems she couldn't solve because she couldn't properly identify them. "Mr. Yamamoto," she said into her phone, her voice carrying aggressive directness she mistook for strength. "I need your commitment by tomorrow morning. The board won't wait any longer for this merger. We've already extended twice, and frankly, your hesitation is beginning to look like bad faith." Daniel winced imperceptibly. In attempting to pressure Yamamoto, Victoria had just committed a cardinal sin of Japanese business culture, implying his company lacked honor. Through his earpiece, the response came in rapid Japanese. Daniel's trained ear caught every nuance. Yamamoto wasn't simply declining, he was terminating 3 years of negotiation. "Hi, wakarimashita," Yamamoto said in a tone Victoria interpreted as agreement. But Daniel heard the phrase that followed in Japanese to someone else. "This partnership is dead. We will not work with someone who questions our honor." Victoria continued, oblivious. "Excellent. So we can expect your team tomorrow." Sterling-san, Yamamoto replied in extremely formal English. "After careful consideration, Nakamura Group has determined our corporate philosophies may not align. We wish you success in finding a partnership that better suits your aggressive strategies." Daniel's knuckles whitened slightly. 300 jobs hung in the balance. James Chen in accounting, whose wife had MS. Maria Santos in reception, widowed with 3 kids in college. Marcus Washington, the security guard who'd served in Afghanistan and now treated everyone with equal dignity. All would lose everything because Victoria never understood that Asian business was about relationships, not just numbers. His phone vibrated. Sophie, his daughter. Every evening at 7:30 during her break at Northwestern's medical library, she texted him, the brilliant 22-year-old studying pediatric oncology because she'd watched cancer steal her mother, while Daniel was 5,000 miles away in Vienna, choosing duty over love. That memory hit hard. November 15th, 2019. The International Security Conference where his translation prevented a U.S.-Russia crisis. He'd stood between Secretary Hawthorne and Defense Minister Volkov, navigating linguistic minefields. At that moment, Sarah was dying at Northwestern Memorial, her hand held by their 17-year-old daughter instead of her husband. Sophie hadn't spoken to him for 2 years afterward. "Turn that music off," Victoria's sharp voice cut through his thoughts. He'd been playing Chopin at barely audible volume. Daniel switched it off calmly. Their eyes met briefly in the mirror, his tired but alert hers blazing with fury. "You're just the help, Daniel. An old driver with no future. Don't forget your position. You're nothing." The words carved deep, not wounding pride he'd sold that along with his Georgetown class ring to pay Sophie's tuition, but reminding him of truth. Once he'd prevented wars with carefully chosen words. Now he remained silent while Victoria destroyed her company through ignorance. The Bentley pulled into Willis Tower's garage. As Victoria stepped out, her phone clattered to the floor. She was already walking away when Daniel retrieved it. The screen showed an email from Robert Chen, CFO. "Plan B in motion. When the Japan-India deal collapses tomorrow, I'll have the votes to remove you. Board meeting at 3 p.m. DataSync agreed to acquire us. I'll be VP with $2 million bonus. The driver probably has more business sense. Destroy this email." Daniel held the phone, momentarily processing this betrayal. Robert, whom Victoria trusted completely, was orchestrating a coup. Your phone, Ms. Sterling, he said, screen now dark. She snatched it without thanks and stalked toward the elevator. Alone, Daniel checked Sophie's message. Dad, incredible news, selected for pediatric oncology research program, youngest ever, but needs $75,000 for equipment. I know the consulting work isn't real. Found your termination letter. Can take a gap year. Please don't sacrifice more. Love you. $75,000. His savings, $8,347.16. He typed back, we'll handle everything. Matsumoto Group needs translation paying $150,000. Never apologize for needing equipment to save lives. So proud. Love, Dad. The lie came easily. No Matsumoto Group existed. His phone rang. Jennifer Park, Victoria's assistant. Daniel, emergency Japanese and Indian delegations arrive tonight. Meeting 8 a.m. tomorrow. All translation agencies booked. Please come back. He took the service elevator, the one security still directed him to after 3 years. As it climbed, he thought about Robert's email. He could let Victoria fall. After 3 years of humiliation, why care? But 300 jobs would disappear. The elevator opened on chaos. Victoria stood surrounded by papers, shouting into her phone, "This is a $1.8 billion deal. Find a translator." Daniel watched from the doorway. He could solve this with one sentence. 9 languages. 22 years of diplomatic experience. Personal relationships with both Yamamoto and Ananya Mehta, maintained through discreet LinkedIn messages. Victoria's eyes found him. What are you still doing here? Get out. The moment of choice. Save the company or let it burn. Daniel stepped forward, shoulders straightening. When he spoke, his voice carried forgotten authority. Ms. Sterling, I can help with the translation problem. Silence. Robert Chen, entering from his office, froze. Jennifer's mouth fell open. What did you say? Victoria's voice was dangerous. I speak Japanese, Mandarin, Hindi, Korean, Arabic, Portuguese, French, German, and Spanish. Fluently, at diplomatic levels. Robert laughed harshly. The driver thinks he's a translator, but Victoria stared at Daniel like seeing a ghost. You're serious. 22 years State Department, Deputy Chief of Translation Services, Senior Advisor to 3 administrations, Lead Interpreter for the Paris Climate Accords, G20, Osaka Summit, Istanbul Peace Talks, PhD from Georgetown, Masters from Harvard. Before budget cuts eliminated my position, I reported directly to the Secretary of State. Victoria's phone rang, Takashi Yamamoto, Tokyo. Without hesitation, Daniel extended his hand. May I? She handed it over in a trance. Daniel answered in flawless Japanese voice, transforming completely. Moshi Yamamoto-sama. Daniel Mitchell to Mushimas. For 20 minutes, he didn't just translate, he rebuilt the failed negotiation. He apologized for the misunderstanding, explaining Victoria's pressure came from dedication, not disrespect. Then he played his ace card. My father was James Mitchell, who worked in Tokyo from 1952 to 1957, helping rebuild after the war. He worked with your father, Yamamoto Hiroshi, on the Marunouchi reconstruction. A long pause. Your father wrote to mine until 1995. He said James Mitchell understood rebuilding wasn't about structures, but trust. Why have you been silent, Mitchell-san? Sometimes we wait for the right moment to reveal ourselves. Ms. Sterling shows courage today in letting someone she overlooked speak for her company. This humility makes a true partner. We will attend tomorrow, 8 sharp. I come to meet James Mitchell's son. Daniel lowered the phone. The room was silent. Yamamoto will attend. The Indian delegation confirmed too. Ms. Mehta is intrigued to meet someone who understands business is personal. Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. Who are you? For 3 years, your driver. Before that, someone who mattered. Tomorrow, if you'll let me, the person who saves your company. Why didn't you say anything? Because every time I tried, I was reminded of my place. 14 months ago, Berlin deal, I mentioned the German pronouns, indicated distance, not partnership. You said drivers drive, they don't think. 6 months ago, Seoul, the Koreans were offended by the seating arrangement. You said stay in your lane. 3 months ago, Mumbai office, I offered to help with Hindi translation. You asked if I learned from Bollywood. Each example landed like a blow. But mostly because after my wife died while I was in Vienna, choosing duty over family, I lost the ability to fight for myself. When the government declared 22 years of service non-essential, I needed any job. My daughter needed stability more than I needed dignity. Robert tried slipping out, but Daniel's voice stopped him. Mr. Chen, the board might find your Cayman Islands account interesting. The 3 million data sync paid you last month. Robert fled. Victoria stood unsteadily. Daniel, you're nothing. You're invisible. Oh God. What's done is done. Right now, 10 hours to prepare for the most important meeting of your life. 300 people depend on the next few hours. Will you help me after everything? Daniel looked at her, really looked. Not the tyrant who'd made his life miserable, but a woman who'd climbed so high she'd forgotten the ground. I'll help you, but not as your driver, as your equal. Victoria extended her hand across the conference table, never offered before in 3 years. Mr. Mitchell, would you consider becoming our Executive Vice President of International Relations? He shook it. Let's save the company first. As their hands met, Jennifer whispered, did our driver just become our salvation? Daniel smiled inwardly. After 3 years of invisibility, he was finally being seen. But more importantly, he was seeing Victoria Sterling, for the first time not as an enemy, but as another human who'd lost her way. His phone buzzed. Sophie, Dad, whatever happens, I love you. You have more dignity as a driver than most CEOs. Mom would be proud. He typed back, everything's going to be fine. Dad's got a new job to do. For the first time in 3 years, it wasn't a lie. The next hours blurred into controlled chaos. Daniel took charge with quiet authority, dividing the exhausted team into working groups. He discovered Jennifer Park had minored in cultural anthropology. She would prepare cultural briefings. Marcus, the security guard, mentioned his daughter studied in Japan. His insights about Japanese educational values would help frame the joint training programs. At 2 in the morning, Victoria paced the conference room. Heels abandoned, stockings torn, her carefully constructed image crumbling. Tell me about Yamamoto's father. How did yours know him? Daniel turned from the window, where he'd been watching the sleeping city. Tokyo, 1952. My father, James Mitchell, was a civil engineer sent by the Marshall Plan. Yamamoto Hiroshi had lost everything in the bombing family home, everything reduced to ash. They worked together 5 years. Different languages, but they found common ground in building. They wrote to each other for 40 years. When my father died in 1995, Yamamoto-san sent 1,000 paper cranes to his funeral. He pulled out a photograph from his briefcase, 2 men before a construction site, one American, one Japanese, both dust-covered but smiling despite the devastation. Victoria studied it intensely. This connection will matter. In Japanese culture, honoring the past is the foundation of the future. Yamamoto grew up hearing about the American who treated his father as an equal when most occupying forces didn't. That's why he even took your call 3 years ago. Jennifer looked up from her laptop. Mr. Mitchell, I found something. Ananya Mehta told the Times of India. Western companies think Indian businesses are just about low costs. We are not your back office. We are future partners if you're wise enough to see it. Daniel nodded. Exactly right. Mehta built Singh Holdings from nothing. Her mother sold vegetables on Mumbai streets to fund her education. She studied by streetlight, no electricity at home. She understands struggle. How do I connect with that? Victoria asked with genuine humility. I grew up in Southside, but spent 20 years trying to forget it. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Tell me about your mother, Daniel said gently. Victoria collapsed into a chair. Elena Kowalski came from Poland at 16, pregnant with me, abandoned by the man who promised her paradise. She cleaned these exact offices for 15 years. 3 jobs to put me through Columbia. Never missed a parent-teacher conference, even if it meant 36 hours without sleep. She stared at her manicured hands. One night I was 10, came to walk her home. Buses had stopped snowstorm. Found her on her knees scrubbing coffee stains while an executive stood over her. He'd spilled it deliberately. I saw him. He said, that's where people like you belong, on your knees. Be grateful you even have a job, immigrant. A tear slipped down her cheek. I swore I'd never kneel to anyone. I'd climb so high no one could look down on me. But somewhere along the way, I became that executive. Every time I looked at you, I saw my mother. I hated the reminder, so I tried to destroy it. Daniel sat across from her, closing 3 years of distance. Your mother's struggle and Maida's mother's struggle are the same story. That's your connection. Not your success, but the foundation it was built on. Tomorrow, don't hide your background. Honor it. The door burst open. Robert Chen stood there, face flushed with alcohol and rage. You think you've won a washed-up translator and a failing CEO? I've called Morrison and Winters. The board meeting happens tomorrow at 3 p.m. They'll vote you out, Victoria. Daniel stood slowly, controlled. Mr. Chen, you're drunk. Leave now while you can still exit gracefully. Or what, you're nobody Mitchell, a has-been who couldn't even make it home for his wife's death. The words were calculated to wound, and they did. But Daniel had endured worse from himself every night for 5 years. Security, Victoria said with newfound dignity. Escort Mr. Chen out. Revoke his access. Jennifer, call legal. Mr. Chen is terminated for cause. You can't. The board will learn about your embezzlement through data sync, Daniel said quietly. The forensic accountants will be very interested in that $3 million consultation fee. Robert went white. How could you? Your assistant Martin came to me last week. He thought a driver would be safe to confide in since I had no power. He was right then. Security dragged Robert out. Silence fell. How much does he really have on the board? Victoria asked. Enough to be dangerous. Morrison and Winters might still push for your removal, but if tomorrow succeeds, their argument collapses. Everything depends on the next 8 hours. His phone buzzed. Sophie at 2:47 a.m. Dad can't sleep. Know something big is happening. Remember what Mom used to say? The bridge you build in the dark carries you to the light. Love you. Daniel smiled, texting back. Your mother was always wiser. Tomorrow everything changes. For the next 3 hours, Daniel transformed Victoria from an American CEO who saw the world through spreadsheets into someone who could navigate Asian business culture. He taught her to bow 15 degrees for Yamamoto, a nod for Meta. He explained gift-giving significance, how wrapping mattered as much as the gift. He coached her on silence and negotiation. When Yamamoto pauses after you speak, he's not hesitating. He's honoring your words by considering them fully. Don't rush. Let silence work. At 5 in the morning, Jennifer finally spoke. Why didn't you quit, find another job? Daniel laughed without humor. 437 job applications. Too old for entry level, too specialized for general management, too threatening for middle management. My skills preventing wars, building peace through language, aren't valued in a world measuring everything in quarterly earnings. He paused. But mostly after Sarah died, after I failed to be there, I didn't believe I deserved better. Driving Miss Sterling, being invisible, it felt like appropriate penance. That's not penance, Victoria said. That's self-destruction. Perhaps, but it kept Sophie in school. Every insult endured bought her another step toward her dream. Dawn broke over Lake Michigan. The night's work lay spread across the table, cultural briefings, gift selections, negotiation strategies. We should prepare, Daniel said. They arrive in 2 hours. Victoria stood. Daniel, about being equals, you're not my equal. Daniel felt the familiar sting. You're my superior. In every way that matters. I need to prove I'm worthy of learning from you. His phone rang, international number. He answered in Hindi. Mitchell Sahib, Ananya Mehta herself. I'm calling because I know who you are. The Mumbai Accords of 2016, you prevented an India-Pakistan trade war that would have destroyed both economies. My cousin was in the Pakistani delegation. He said an American translator saved millions of jobs with one corrected phrase. Ms. Mehta. I also know you've been driving Victoria Sterling for 3 years. Tell me what kind of person chooses servitude when they could have power. Daniel considered carefully. The kind who learned too late that power without purpose is emptiness. Who discovered sometimes you must become nothing to understand what matters. A pause. Then Mehta laughed warmly. I look forward to our meeting. Perhaps there's hope for American business after all. The call ended. Daniel looked at Victoria, who watched with awe mixed with shame. She knows who I am. This changes the dynamic. How? By being exactly who we are. No pretense. You're a woman who built an empire but lost her soul. I'm a man who saved nations but couldn't save his wife. Together, we're proof failure isn't final. 7:30. Daniel stood in the executive washroom staring at his reflection. For 3 years, he'd avoided looking directly afraid of what he'd become. Now wearing a Navy Hugo Boss suit Jennifer had procured, he saw someone caught between identities, neither the diplomat he'd been, nor the driver he'd become, but something new forming. Victoria entered, then stopped. Sorry, I didn't. It's fine. We're past ordinary boundaries. She moved to the sink beside him. She changed into a simpler suit hair in a basic chignon, minimal makeup. She looked younger, vulnerable, real. I called Isabella, my daughter, at boarding school. At 7 in the morning, wanted to catch her before classes. Haven't called in 6 months. She didn't recognize my voice. Asked if someone had died. The only time I call is emergencies. What kind of mother has a daughter who doesn't know her voice? One who can change. Sophie didn't speak to me for 2 years after Sarah died. Now we text daily. Redemption isn't a single act, Victoria. It's a daily choice. Call me Victoria. If you're going to save my company and maybe my soul, we should use first names. Victoria. And yes, we're doing this. Not because you deserve it, but because 300 people deserve their jobs. Because Yamamoto and Meta deserve a partner who understands business is more than profit. Because Sophie deserves a father who remembers how to matter. Jennifer burst in panicked. They're here, but Robert Chen is in the lobby with board members. Morrison, Winters, and Blackstone. They're trying to intercept the delegations. They ran for the elevator. As it descended, Daniel's mind raced through possibilities. What do we do? Victoria asked. We don't hide. We acknowledge and transcend. Follow my lead. The elevator opened on chaos. Both delegations filled the lobby, Robert holding court with board members, Marcus desperately maintaining order. Robert saw them first. There she is, the CEO who drove Nexus to bankruptcy, and her chauffeur she's desperately passing off as a translator. Silence fell. Yamamoto stood with his team. Meta watched with Predator's attention, deciding whether to strike or wait. Everything balanced on a knife's edge. Daniel stepped forward using what diplomats called the bridge voice, loud enough to carry calm, enough to soothe, authoritative enough to command. Yamamoto-sama, he said, bowing deeply, 45 degrees of profound honor. In perfect Japanese, I am James Mitchell's son, who had the honor of working with your father. I have been many things: diplomat, translator, failure, and yes, driver. Today I'm simply someone hoping to build a bridge between honor and understanding. He turned to Meta hands in namaste. In Mumbai Street Hindi, Meta ji, I know the value of struggle. Like your mother who sold vegetables to educate her daughter, I drove a car to educate mine. Then in English, yes, I've been Ms. Sterling's driver for 3 years. Before that, I served my country 22 years. I lost position, purpose, and wife because I confused importance with meaning. But I never lost my ability to understand that business, like peace, is built on understanding between people who choose to see each other's humanity. Morrison grabbed Robert's arm, staring at Daniel with recognition. Wait, Daniel Mitchell, you saved the Berlin conference in 2017. My brother was there. Said an American translator prevented complete EU-US trade breakdown. It was my job, Mr. Morrison. Just as driving Ms. Sterling was my job, just as helping Nexus survive is my job today. Yamamoto stepped forward. Mitchell-san, your father once told mine that honor isn't about never falling, but how you choose to rise. I'm trying, Yamamoto-sama, with help from unexpected sources. He glanced at Victoria. Made a move closer. And Sterling-san, has she risen, or is this performance? Victoria stepped forward, transformed. Not the armor of arrogance, but something rawer, more honest. Ms. Meta, 3 days ago, I called this man nothing. Told him he was invisible, worthless, replaceable. I treated him worse than furniture because he reminded me of my mother, who cleaned these floors, who was treated as nothing by people like I became. She paused, gathering courage. I am my mother's daughter, but I forgot her dignity. I climbed so high I couldn't see the ground I came from. Daniel saved my company, but more, he showed me strength isn't standing above others, but having courage to admit when you're wrong. The lobby remained silent. Even traffic outside seemed to pause. Daniel helped Victoria stand taller, not physically, but through his presence. "We stand together in possibility," he said. Yamamoto began clapping slowly. Meta joined, then Marcus, then Jennifer. Soon the entire lobby applauded not for performance, but for genuine human transformation. Robert tried slipping away, but Winters blocked him. "We need to discuss your Cayman account, Robert." As security led Robert away, Yamamoto approached. "Shall we proceed? We have a merger to discuss. Perhaps a new model for how American and Asian businesses truly partner." The elevator ride was silent but comfortable. Daniel stood between Victoria and the delegations, literally and figuratively, bridging worlds. His phone showed a photo from Sophie, a young patient declared cancer-free. Caption, "This is why we never give up, Dad." The conference room had been transformed. Circular seating, Eastern philosophy meeting, Western egalitarianism. Perfect gifts placed for Yamamoto, the 1952 photograph of their fathers reframed in traditional Japanese style. For Meta, a first edition Tagore poetry collection that belonged to Daniel's mother. "Before we begin," Daniel said, "I'm not here as Victoria's employee or Nexus's representative. I'm here as someone who believes business can be more than transactions. If that aligns with your vision, we proceed. If not, we part as friends." Meta laughed brightly. "Mitchell Sahib, you sound like my mother haggling establishing relationship before discussing price. Victoria, you've learned well from your driver." "My teacher," Victoria corrected. "My reminder of what I'd forgotten." The negotiation that followed would be studied not for tactics, but as an example of vulnerability, meeting strength, honesty, meeting ambition, people choosing to see rather than use each other. The negotiation began at precisely 8:15. Daniel didn't merely translate words, he translated philosophies bridging centuries of cultural evolution in real time. When Yamamoto spoke of Ikigai, life's purpose, Daniel connected it to Nexus Dynamics' mission of technology, enhancing rather than replacing human connection. When Meta challenged profit projections, he reframed the conversation around sustainable growth, honoring workers in Chicago, Tokyo, and Mumbai equally. 2 hours in, Morrison, Winters, and Blackstone entered unannounced. "We're calling an emergency board meeting," Morrison declared. "This circus ends now." Winters checked his phone. "Actually, I'm withdrawing my opposition. Our forensic team confirmed Robert Chen has been siphoning funds for 2 years. Every failed deal he profited. Victoria has faults, but she's not a criminal." Blackstone, the eldest board member, moved beside Victoria. "15 years on this board, I've watched you transform from brilliant but brutal to something else today. If these delegations trust this new Nexus Dynamics, so do I." The momentum shifted. Contracts were negotiated, terms agreed upon, but more importantly, relationships were built. Yamamoto and Daniel stood by the window during a break. "Your father would be proud," Yamamoto said quietly. "Not of your diplomatic career, but of choosing to serve when service meant invisibility." "I'm not sure I chose it, Yamamoto-sama. Perhaps it chose me. The best purposes always do." By noon, they had framework agreements. But then came the first major crisis. Victoria's phone rang the Mumbai office. Their primary server had crashed, potentially losing 3 years of development data. Without it, the merger's technical foundation would collapse. "It's over," Victoria said, face pale. "That's our entire AI framework." Daniel took the phone, switching to Hindi. He spoke with Rajesh, their Mumbai IT director, for 10 minutes, then called someone else in Mandarin, then another in Korean. "What are you doing?" Victoria asked. "Calling in favors from my diplomatic days." Within an hour, he had assembled a virtual team, a Korean cybersecurity expert he'd helped during a trade dispute, a Chinese data recovery specialist, whose visa he'd once saved, an Indian systems architect, whose daughter he'd helped get into MIT through a recommendation letter written years ago. They worked across time zones, languages, and old friendships. By 2 p.m., the data was recovered. "How?" Victoria asked, amazed. "Every kindness creates a debt," Daniel said. "Not of obligation, but of connection. These people remembered when I mattered to them. They're returning the favor." Meta had watched all of this with sharp eyes. "Mitchell Sahib, I have a proposition. Lead our joint innovation center. 700,000 annually plus equity. Daniel looked at Victoria, who was actually listening to Maria Santos explain her customer service ideas. Thank you, but my work here isn't finished. You would stay with someone who humiliated you. I would stay to help someone who had the courage to change. At 3 p.m., exactly when Robert had planned Victoria's removal, something unexpected happened. Isabella Sterling walked into the conference room. Isabella, Victoria stood shocked. You're supposed to be at school in Connecticut. I took a train, the 17-year-old said. She was 17, not 14, a senior preparing for college, not a freshman. I had to see if it was true, if my mother finally remembered who she was before she became too important to call. The room went silent. This wasn't planned, wasn't professional. It was raw real. I'm sorry, Victoria whispered. I don't want apologies, Mom. I want you to meet someone. Isabella turned to Daniel. Mr. Mitchell, this is why I came. To thank you for giving me my mother back. She called me this morning. First time in 6 months. She said you taught her that strength isn't about standing above others, but standing beside them. Daniel saw Victoria crying openly now, professional facade completely gone. Your mother taught herself, Isabella. I just reminded her to look. Isabella pulled out her phone. I've been accepted early admission to University of Chicago, pre-med. I want to be like Sophie, your daughter, someone who saves lives with her own hands. Sophie, who had been texting Daniel updates from the hospital, suddenly appeared in the doorway. She'd driven over during her lunch break. Dad, I had to come. The FDA just fast-tracked our pediatric cancer detection protocol. We can start trials next month. We're going to save kids, Dad. Kids who won't lose their mothers like I did. The two young women looked at each other, Isabella Sterling and Sophie Mitchell, daughters of people who had failed and were trying to rise. You're Sophie, Isabella said. Your father talks about you constantly. And you're Isabella. My dad says you're brilliant. Victoria and Daniel watched their daughters embrace 2 generations beginning to heal wounds their parents had created. This is highly irregular, Yamamoto said, but he was smiling. In Japan, we would say this is N, the destiny that connects people across time and circumstance. Maida nodded. In India, we call it karma, actions creating future. Today, I see good karma being born. The formal negotiations resumed, but the energy had transformed. It wasn't just business anymore. It was personal, familial, human. By 5 p.m., they had a complete agreement, but Daniel noticed something wrong. Jennifer Park was at her laptop, face white with panic. What is it? He asked quietly. Data sync, she whispered. They've announced a hostile takeover attempt. If our stock drops below $30, they can force a sale. We're at $31.50 and falling. Daniel looked at the number. They had maybe an hour before data sync could destroy everything they'd built today. Don't tell Victoria yet, he said. Let me handle this. He stepped out and made a call he'd been avoiding for 3 years, to his former boss at the State Department. Patricia, it's Daniel Mitchell. Patricia Hawthorne, now Secretary of State, recognized his voice immediately. Daniel, my God, we thought you disappeared. I need a favor. Data Sync Corporation, are they on your radar? Very much so. They've been flagged for industrial espionage, possible foreign interference. Why? They're attempting a hostile takeover of Nexus Dynamics, the company I work for. You work for Nexus in what capacity? Daniel paused. It's complicated, but if DataSync succeeds, they'll have access to AI technology with defense applications, the kind you wouldn't want in the wrong hands. Patricia was quiet for a moment. I'll make some calls. Give me 20 minutes. Daniel returned to find Victoria showing Yamamoto and Meta around the office, introducing them to employees by name, Maria Santos, Marcus Washington, James Chen. She knew their stories now, their dreams, their struggles. His phone buzzed. Patricia, SEC is opening an immediate investigation into DataSync for securities fraud. Trading suspended. You're safe. The relief was overwhelming. David Chen burst in. The stock stabilized. DataSync's takeover failed. They're under federal investigation. Victoria looked at Daniel. She knew somehow that he was behind this. How? She asked quietly. Old friends, old favors, the kind that matter when everything's at stake. As the sun set over Chicago, the contracts were signed. Nakamura Group and Singh Holdings were now partners with Nexus Dynamics. The company was saved. But more than that, something new had been born, a different kind of corporation, one that valued every person. Yamamoto prepared to leave but stopped beside Daniel. Mitchell-san, I have something for you. He handed over an envelope. From my father's papers. A letter your father wrote him in 1957 before returning to America. Daniel opened it with trembling hands. His father's handwriting, Hiroshi, we came together as former enemies and leave as brothers. The buildings we raised will someday fall, but the trust we built will stand forever. Teach your children that honor lives not in never falling, but in always rising. Teach them that every person matters, from the architect to the laborer. Most importantly, teach them that the bridges between hearts are stronger than those of steel. Your friend always, James. Daniel couldn't speak. Yamamoto bowed deeply. Your father's words guided my father's life. Now they guide mine. This merger is not business, Mitchell-san. It is honoring our father's legacy. As the delegations departed, Victoria stood beside Daniel in the now empty conference room. We did it, she said. No, you did it. You did. You chose to change. I had help. She paused. Daniel, there's something else. The board wants you as co-CEO. Equal partnership. Same salary as mine. Your name on the door. Daniel looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle. 3 years ago, I would have given anything for that recognition. Now I understand that titles don't determine worth, but I'll accept on one condition. Name it. We institute the Mitchell-Sterling Protocol. Every employee gets equity. Every voice matters in major decisions. We create an education fund for employees' children. We mandate that executives work frontline positions 1 day per month. We make Marcus head of employee relations, Maria head of customer experience, James our chief storytelling officer. Victoria smiled. You're restructuring everything. I'm restructuring nothing. I'm recognizing what already exists, that every person here has been essential all along. His phone rang. Sophie. Dad, Channel 7 wants to interview us together about the FDA approval. But more importantly, Isabella and I are having coffee. She's amazing, Dad. You saved more than a company today. As they prepared to leave, Daniel stopped by the parking garage one last time. Ahmad, the Syrian refugee he'd recommended as the new driver, was polishing the Bentley. Mr. Mitchell. Ahmad said, Ms. Sterling told me something today. She said every driver might be a diplomat in waiting, that I should never let anyone make me invisible. Daniel smiled. She's learned well. Remember, Ahmad, this job is temporary. You're going to be much more. How do you know? Because everyone is more than they appear. It just takes the right moment for the world to see it. Victoria joined him in the garage. They stood where it all began, where she'd called him nothing, where he'd chosen silence over pride. 3 years, she said. 3 years you drove me while I destroyed everything good about myself. 3 years you gave me employment when no one else would. 3 years Sophie stayed in school. 3 years I learned that humility isn't about being small, it's about understanding what truly matters. What matters, Daniel? Connection, service, the choice to see humanity in everyone, especially those we're trained to overlook. I'm going to spend the rest of my career making amends, Victoria said. No, you're going to spend it building something better. We both are. The next morning, Daniel arrived at Willis Tower at dawn as he had for 3 years, but this time he parked in the executive section. As he walked through the lobby, Marcus Washington stood straighter. Good morning, Mr. Mitchell. I mean, Daniel. Morning, Marcus. And thank you for seeing me when no one else did. You always saw us too, sir. Every birthday card, every "How's your daughter in Japan?" Every time you remembered we were human. Daniel took the executive elevator for the first time. On the 47th floor, he found Victoria already there, but not in her office. She was in the break room making coffee for the early arriving staff. Old habits, Daniel asked. New ones. If my mother could serve others with dignity for 15 years, I can pour coffee with humility for however many years I have left. Jennifer Park arrived carrying boxes. These are from your storage unit, Daniel. Your diplomas, commendations, the photo from the White House. Daniel looked at the items from his former life. Put them in the conference room, not my office. They're reminders of where I've been, not who I am now. At 9 a.m., they held their first all-hands meeting as co-CEOs. The main floor was packed, all 300 employees from executives to night custodial staff. Victoria spoke first. 6 months ago, this company almost died because I couldn't see you. All of you. I saw titles, not people. Functions, not families. I saw drivers, not diplomats. She looked at Daniel. I've learned that every person here carries wisdom, experience, dreams that have nothing to do with their job description, but everything to do with their value. Daniel stepped forward. Today we announced the Mitchell-Sterling Protocol. Every employee becomes a shareholder. Every voice has weight in major decisions. Education funding for your children, healthcare that actually covers your families, and something else, the Visibility Initiative. Maria Santos raised her hand. What's that mean? It means you, Maria, are now Chief of Customer Experience. Your ideas about service, shaped by years at that front desk, will reshape how we interact with clients. Marcus, you're Head of Employee Relations. James, you're our Chief Storytelling Officer. Your poetry about numbers and humanity will guide how we present financial data. The room buzzed with excitement, but also skepticism. Can this really work? Someone called out. Yamamoto, who had returned for the announcement, stood. In Japan, we have practiced similar philosophy for decades. The janitor's insight can save a company. The driver's observation can prevent disaster. Mitchell-san proved this true. Meta, participating via video from Mumbai, added, Singh Holdings is implementing this model across India. We're calling it the Chicago Revolution, when American business remembered that every person has value. The changes began immediately. The executive floor was reorganized, no more corner offices hoarded by senior management. Instead, collaborative spaces where anyone could meet with anyone. The parking garage hierarchy ended, spaces were first come, first served. The executive dining room became an all-employee cafeteria where Victoria and Daniel ate alongside everyone else. 3 months later, something extraordinary happened. Nexus Dynamics productivity increased 40%. Employee retention hit 98%. The company won contracts they'd never dreamed of, not because of their technology, but because of their culture. But the real test came when DataSync, out from under federal investigation, attempted another attack, this time trying to poach Nexus's best people with triple salaries. Daniel and Victoria watched as employee after employee turned down the offers. Why? Victoria asked James Chen, who'd rejected a $500,000 package. Because here I matter. My poetry matters. My ideas matter. At DataSync, I'd be employee number 4792. Here I'm James. One evening, 6 months after the transformation began, Daniel found himself in his office, not the storage room he'd first chosen, but not the corner suite either. A modest space with pictures covering the walls, his father and Tokyo Sarah on their wedding day, Sophie in her lab coat and new additions, the entire Nexus family at the company picnic, Victoria and Isabella at Isabella's high school graduation, Marcus receiving his employee relations certification. Sophie called via video. Behind her was the new Mitchell Center for Pediatric Oncology Research, funded entirely by Nexus's profit-sharing program. Dad, we just diagnosed the 100th child using the early detection protocol. 100 kids who won't lose a parent. 100 families that won't go through what we did. Your mother would be so proud. She is, Dad. I know she is. Sophie paused. Isabella got into pre-med at University of Chicago. She wants to join our research team. The sins of the parents being redeemed by their children. No, Dad. The love of parents inspiring their children. You taught me that failure isn't final. That falling isn't the end if you help others rise. After the call, Daniel walked through the office. It was past 9 p.m., but people were still there, not because they had to be, but because they wanted to be. Maria was teaching Spanish to a group of executives. Marcus was running his veteran support group in Conference Room B. James was leading a workshop on finding poetry in spreadsheets. Victoria found him on the roof terrace looking out at Chicago's lights. Regrets, she asked. None. You, every day. But that's good, it keeps me humble. Keeps me remembering. Isabella seems happy. She is. For the first time since the divorce, she has both parents present. You taught me that presence isn't about proximity, but about truly seeing someone. They stood in comfortable silence. Then Victoria said, Patricia Hawthorne called. The State Department wants you back, offering you Chief of Translation Services, the position you always wanted. Daniel smiled. 3 years ago, I would have taken it without hesitation. Now, now it doesn't matter. Now I understand that I'm already serving my country by proving that American business can be about more than profit, that capitalism and compassion aren't opposites, that every citizen, regardless of position, has value. So you're staying. We have work to finish, Victoria. The Chicago Revolution, as Meta calls it, is just beginning. A year after the transformation, Harvard Business School sent a team to study Nexus Dynamics. Their report, published in the Harvard Business Review, was titled, "The Last Mile: How One Company Traveled from Hierarchy to Humanity." The article featured a photo that became iconic: Daniel and Victoria standing in the parking garage beside the Bentley where their journey began. But they weren't alone. Surrounding them were all 300 employees, from Ahmad, the new driver, to Marcus, the security guard turned relations head, from Maria, the receptionist turned customer executive, to James, the poet accountant. The caption read, "Every person in this photo saved this company. Every person in this photo matters. Every person in this photo proves that the last mile of any journey isn't about reaching a destination, but about discovering that everyone on the road deserves to be seen." Daniel kept a copy of that article, not framed on his wall, but tucked in his wallet next to Sophie's graduation photo and a worn letter from his father. Sometimes during long meetings or difficult days, he would touch it through the leather, remembering Vienna and Sarah's last breath taken without him, remembering 3 years of silence behind a wheel, remembering the moment he chose to speak, remembering that redemption isn't a single act, but a daily choice to see others and help them see themselves. One day, Ahmad came to his office. "Mr. Mitchell, I've been accepted to business school. Night program. Ms. Sterling is paying for it." "That's wonderful, Ahmad. I want you to know I'll never forget what you taught me." "What's that?" "That driving is just the first mile. That everyone's journey is longer than it appears. That dignity exists in every honest work." "You taught me something too, Ahmad." "What could I possibly teach you?" "That starting over in a new country, learning a new language, driving someone else's car, while dreaming of your own future, that takes more courage than anything I've ever done. You reminded me that everyone who seems to be at the beginning of their journey might actually be in the middle of an epic one." After Ahmad left, Daniel stood at his window. The parking garage was visible below that concrete cathedral where he had been broken and rebuilt. The Bentley was gone, now replaced by a modest fleet of hybrid vehicles available to any employee who needed them. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number with a photo: children in a refugee camp in Syria, holding a sign, "Thank you, Mitchell Sterling Foundation for the Schools." Victoria had expanded their giving beyond medical research, beyond Chicago, beyond America. They were building bridges everywhere, the kind his father and Yamamoto's father had built, not of steel and concrete, but of human connection. Another message, this one from Isabella and Sophie together. "Our research paper just got accepted to the New England Journal of Medicine, first student written paper in the journal's history. We're calling it The Last Mile: Early Detection Protocols for Pediatric Cancers. Thank you for showing us that the last mile isn't the end, but the beginning." Daniel smiled, texting back, "Your mothers would be so proud. Sarah and Elena, both women who sacrificed everything so their children could rise. You are their victory." As the sun set over Lake Michigan, painting the city in shades of gold and possibility, Daniel Mitchell stood in the office he never thought he'd have, looking out at the city where he'd lost everything and found something better. Not redemption, that was too simple a word. Not success, that was too small a concept. What he'd found was connection, purpose, the understanding that every person carries within them the capacity to save, or be saved to lift, or be lifted to drive, or be driven. The last mile of his journey had taught him the most important lesson of all: we're all traveling together, and everyone deserves to arrive. 6 months later, the transformation of Nexus Dynamics had become more than a business success story. It had become a movement. The Chicago model, as economists called it, was being studied and implemented across 5 continents. But in the Willis Tower offices, it was just another Tuesday morning. Daniel Mitchell stood in the employee cafeteria, formerly the executive dining room pouring coffee for Maria Santos, who was now teaching her customer service philosophy to a group of visiting Japanese executives. The secret, Maria explained through Daniel's translation, is remembering that every caller is someone's parent-child spouse. They're not account numbers. They're people having a day, maybe a bad one, and we can make it better. Yamamoto's team took notes reverently. One asked, Santo-san, where did you study business? Maria laughed. Life. 3 kids' widowhood and 8 years at a reception desk watching what makes people feel seen or invisible. Daniel smiled, remembering when Maria was invisible to everyone except other invisible people like him. Now she was teaching executives from Tokyo, Mumbai, and London. His phone buzzed. Sophie, Dad's sitting with Isabella for the announcement. You near a TV? Daniel turned on the conference room screen just as the CNN breaking news banner appeared. FDA approves Mitchell Sterling protocol for nationwide implementation, pediatric cancer detection to be standard in all hospitals. The anchor continued. The breakthrough developed by Sophie Mitchell and Isabella Sterling, both 23, will require screening for all children under 10. Experts estimate this could save 10,000 lives annually. The cafeteria erupted in celebration. Victoria, who had been in the kitchen actually washing dishes, her Tuesday morning ritual came out with tears streaming down her face. They did it, she whispered. Our daughters did what we couldn't. They saved lives with their own hands. They did what we taught them, Daniel replied. They looked where others didn't bother to see. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Patricia Hawthorne's Secretary of State arrived unannounced. Daniel, she said, entering his modest office, we need to talk. Victoria joined them, and Patricia's expression was serious. The UN wants to implement your model not just for business, but for international relations. They're calling it diplomatic visibility, the idea that every nation, regardless of size or power, has equal voice. They want you both to lead it. Daniel and Victoria exchanged glances. Together, Victoria asked. The driver and the CEO who became partners. The proof that hierarchy is an illusion. You'd be based in New York but traveling globally. The position comes with significant influence. You'd be reshaping how the world conducts diplomacy. Daniel looked at the photos on his wall, his Nexus family, Sophie's graduation, his father in Tokyo. Can I give you an answer tomorrow? That evening, Daniel called a meeting, not of executives, but of everyone, all 300 employees gathered in the main conference space. The UN has offered us something, he began explaining the opportunity, but Victoria and I won't make this decision alone. This company taught us that every voice matters, so we're asking what should we do? The discussion lasted 3 hours. Marcus spoke about the impact they were having in Chicago. James read a poem about roots and wings. Maria talked about her children, how they now told friends their mother was important, not because of her title, but because she was heard. Finally, Ahmad, who was now finishing his MBA while training his replacement as driver, stood. Mr. Mitchell, Ms. Sterling, you taught us that every journey has many miles. You completed one here from invisible to essential. Maybe now it's time for the next mile. Take what we built and show the world. We'll keep building here. The vote was unanimous go. A month later, Daniel's last day at Nexus Dynamics arrived. He chose to spend it as he'd spent so many others driving. But this time, he wasn't alone. Victoria sat beside him in the front seat of a modest Toyota. They'd sold the Bentley, donating the proceeds to driver education programs. They picked up employees, drove them to work, listening to their stories. Marcus talked about his daughter's wedding in Kyoto, how Yamamoto's family had attended. Maria shared that her eldest had been accepted to Columbia full scholarship from the Employee Education Fund. James had published his poetry collection, Numbers and Souls Finding Humanity in Spreadsheets. Their last stop was Northwestern University's Mitchell Center for Pediatric Oncology Research. Sophie and Isabella were waiting, both in lab coats, both beaming. We have something to show you, Sophie said, leading them inside. On the wall was a plaque in memory of Sarah Mitchell and Elena Kowalski Sterling, mothers, whose sacrifice became salvation for thousands. Below it, a photo Daniel had never seen Sarah and Elena at a company Christmas party in 1995. Sarah already fighting cancer, radiant in red. Elena in her cleaning uniform, laughing at something Sarah had said. How? Victoria gasped. We found it in the building archives, Isabella explained. They knew each other, our mothers. Elena used to bring Mom extra food when she was going through chemo. Sarah taught Elena English phrases for her citizenship test. They were friends. We were always connected even before we knew it. Daniel and Victoria stood speechless, understanding finally that their journey together had begun long before that rainy night on Michigan Avenue. The farewell party that evening wasn't in the executive conference room, but in the parking garage where it all began. Someone had strung lights between the concrete pillars, transforming the space into something magical. Daniel stood where he'd once sat in the Bentley, invisible and breaking. Now he was surrounded by family, not of blood, but of choice, of shared struggle and triumph. Victoria called for silence. 3 years ago in this garage, I called Daniel nothing. Today in this same space, I call him everything: teacher, partner, friend, and living proof that grace exists in the most unexpected places. Daniel raised his coffee cup. They'd banned champagne, choosing instead the drink that had sustained them through countless early mornings and late nights. Every person here saved me, he said. Marcus, who saw me when I was invisible. Maria, who reminded me that dignity exists in all honest work. James, who found poetry where others saw only numbers. Ahmad, who showed me that starting over takes more courage than staying still. He turned to Victoria. And you, who had the courage to change when change seemed impossible. Who chose to see when blindness was easier. Who proved that redemption isn't just possible but powerful. Sophie stepped forward. Dad, Mom would want me to say this. You didn't fail her by being in Vienna. You honored her by surviving, by raising me, by becoming someone who helps others rise. The last mile isn't about reaching a destination, it's about realizing the journey changes everyone on the road. 6 months into their UN position, Daniel and Victoria stood before the General Assembly. Representatives from 193 nations filled the hall, powerful and powerless, rich and poor, all equal in this moment. The Chicago model isn't about business. Daniel began in English, then repeated in 8 other languages. It's about recognizing that the driver might be a diplomat, the cleaner might be a philosopher, the security guard might be a warrior poet. Every nation here, regardless of size or wealth, carries wisdom the world needs. Victoria continued. I spent years believing strength meant standing above others. I learned it means standing beside them. Today we propose something radical, that every nation gets equal voice in this assembly. Not equal votes weighted by power, but truly equal voice. The Maldives matters as much as America. Bhutan's happiness index might teach more than our GDP. The proposal was controversial, revolutionary, seemingly impossible, but they had photos on their phones. Nexus Dynamics stock price up 400%, employee satisfaction at 99%, innovations flowing from every level of the company. It works, Victoria said simply. We're living proof. 2 years later, the first diplomatic visibility summit was held in Chicago. Daniel insisted it be at Willis Tower in the same conference room where he'd saved Nexus Dynamics. Representatives from 50 nations sat in a circle, no head table, no hierarchy. The Prince of Denmark sat between a farmer from Bangladesh who'd invented a new irrigation system and a teacher from Rwanda who'd developed a reconciliation curriculum. Sophie and Isabella, now Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Sterling, presented their latest research cancer detection methods adapted for developing nations, costing pennies instead of thousands. Our mothers were invisible, Sophie said. One died of cancer, one cleaned offices. But their invisibility became our sight. We see what others miss because we learn to look where others don't. That night, Daniel stood once more in the parking garage. Ahmad was there now, CEO of his own international transport company, employing refugee drivers worldwide. You know what you taught me, Mr. Mitchell, Ahmad said, that every mile matters. The ones where we're invisible and the ones where we're seen. They're all part of the journey. Marcus arrived, he'd retired, but still consulted teaching companies how to see their security staff as human. Remember when you used to arrive at 5 a.m., Mr. Mitchell? You always said good morning, always asked about my daughter in Japan. You saw me when you were invisible yourself. That's real strength. Maria joined them now, running a customer service institute that trained companies globally. My children call you Tio Daniel, she said, the uncle who showed their mother she mattered. As more people arrived, employees, partners, friends, the garage filled with warmth and light. The space that had witnessed humiliation had become holy ground, where transformation was born from suffering. Victoria stood beside him as the celebration continued around them. "Any regrets?" she asked. "No. Every mile was necessary. The diplomat, the driver, the man who lost everything, they all led here." "Where's here?" Daniel looked around at the gathering black and white, rich and poor executive, and hourly, all equal, all essential. "Here is proof that the last mile isn't about ending, but about understanding that everyone on the journey matters. That falling isn't failure if you help others rise. That invisibility can become insight. That 3 years of silence can become a lifetime of being heard." His phone buzzed. A message from the UN Secretary General. "The General Assembly voted. Diplomatic visibility passed unanimously. Every nation now has equal voice. You changed the world, Mr. Mitchell. Again." Daniel showed it to Victoria, who smiled through tears. "We changed the world," he corrected. "All of us. Every person who was ever called nothing. Every driver who was actually a diplomat. Every cleaner who was actually a philosopher. Every security guard who was actually a guardian angel." As the night ended and people began departing, Daniel and Victoria walked to the street together. Chicago spread before them, lights twinkling like possibilities. "What now?" Victoria asked. "Now we continue. The next mile, then the next. Always remembering that everyone we pass is traveling their own last mile, carrying their own cargo of dreams and disappointments, hope and hurt. Together, together, the driver and the CEO, the servant and the served. Proof that those are just roles we play, not who we are." They stood there, two people who had traveled from cruelty to kindness, from blindness to sight, from somebody to nobody, and back to somebody again, but a different kind of somebody. The kind who knew that everyone was somebody, had always been somebody, would always be somebody. In the distance, Lake Michigan stretched toward the horizon, its dark waters reflecting the city lights. Somewhere another driver was being called nothing. Another CEO was missing the wisdom around them. Another company was failing because it couldn't see its own people. But change was spreading. The Chicago model, diplomatic visibility, the Mitchell-Sterling protocol. Different names for the same truth that the last mile of any journey isn't about the destination, but about discovering that everyone traveling deserves to arrive with dignity. Daniel's phone rang. Sophie and Isabella calling together. "Dad, Victoria, we just got word. The Mitchell-Sterling centers are opening in 12 countries next month. Thousands of children will be screened. Thousands of mothers won't die like ours did. Your mother's sacrifice becomes the world's salvation," Daniel said. "No, Dad. Your humility became our inspiration. You showed us that falling from the heights teaches you to see those still climbing. That 3 years of being called nothing prepared you to prove everyone is something." After the call, Daniel and Victoria stood in comfortable silence. The parking garage was quiet, now empty except for memories and possibilities. "Thank you," Victoria said finally. "For what? For saving my company. For saving me. For showing me that strength isn't about power, but about the courage to change." "Thank you," Daniel replied. "For what? For giving me a job when no one else would. For keeping Sophie in school. For teaching me that redemption requires two people, one to fall and one to witness the rising." They walked toward their separate cars, both modest, both practical. No more Bentleys, no more barriers. "Same time tomorrow?" Victoria asked. "Same time, different world." As Daniel drove home through the streets of Chicago, he passed Willis Tower one more time. The building rose into the night sky, each lighted window a life, a story, a possibility. Somewhere up there, a janitor was creating order from chaos. A security guard was keeping watch. A receptionist was preparing for tomorrow's kindness. All of them mattered. All of them were essential. All of them were traveling their own last miles toward their own transformations. The radio played Chopin's Nocturne No. 2, the same piece Victoria had demanded he turn off that night. Everything changed. Now it played freely, its melancholy beauty, filling the car, a reminder that sadness and joy, falling and rising, invisibility and recognition were all notes in the same symphony. Daniel Mitchell, former diplomat, former driver, current human, smiled as he drove toward home. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new miles to travel, new people to see and be seen by. But tonight in this moment, he understood the truth Sophie had spoken. The last mile isn't about reaching a destination, but about discovering that everyone on the road is headed somewhere sacred, and we all deserve to arrive whole. The story of the driver who saved a company would be told in many languages in many nations, but the truth of it would live in smaller moments every time someone looked past a uniform to see a universe, every time a CEO chose humility over hierarchy, every time someone remembered that we're all just travelers helping each other home.